Right now, Bitcoin is actually potentially putting in a massive bull trap. We're potentially going to be rallying in towards a 50-week moving average, and then we're going to be heading in towards a bear market, just like in 2021, 2017, and 2014. So we need to be covering what's going to be happening next. I have a lot of charts, I have a lot of data points actually presented for you guys. So make sure to be watching till the end, as I'm going to be covering what's going to be happening in that short term, medium term, and a longer term. And of course, I'm going to be covering altcoins and what's going to be happening for Ethereum. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight away into this banger. Bow. So far in Q4, you can see that it's been massively red. This has been one of the worst Q4s we've had in the post-halving year. So you can see that right now, things are not looking so good for Bitcoin. And we need to be covering why that is and what's going to be happening next. And we can identify quickly looking at the Coinbase premium that ever since this downturn actually happened, the Coinbase premium flipped negative and it started to increase. And when it actually reached its peak, that's where we actually bottomed. And ever since, it's been, creeping towards the upside and now flipping positive. We've actually seen a somewhat of a relief rally, a shorter kind of bounce that we've been seeing. So is this going to be the bottom for Bitcoin? Is this confirmed low? Are we going to be continuing towards the upside? What's going to be happening next? I'm going to be covering that, but you can see in more detail that that bottom there was where the Coinbase premiums was extremely negative. We were seeing a lot of US selling, and this has been massively red for the whole month. So of course it's flipped green now, and that's a good sign to be seeing. We can also observe in the ETF inflows for Bitcoin that we had a first green week after a month of red selling. So that's actually one thing to be noting, that's actually quite good. And of course, in this massive flush towards the downside, we can see right now that we had open interest actually flushing towards the downside, just like previously in 2024. And of course, earlier this year we had a massive flush. This has happened again on this downturn. So this is a good thing to be seeing, as the weak hands have been shaken out. And if we observe as well, this long to short ratio in the shorter time frames have actually flipped towards majority short. So of course, a lot of people are shorting right now, and we need to be covering what's going to be happening in that short term. Are we going to be seeing a relief rally to liquidate these shorters? Are we going to be seeing a move towards the upside to actually grab the liquidity? As you can see right now, the majority of the liquidity is actually stacked above us. So we can be seeing a move towards the upside to grab that liquidity, since the majority of retail are actually short. So that's one thing that I think is going to be happening. And this is why I have this scenario actually mapped out on the thumbnail. And of course, the main talking point of the video is that we can potentially see the liquidity being grabbed. We can test this 50-week moving average, and then that's where we're going to be seeing a move towards the downside, since in 2021, 2017, and 2014, we've seen this happen. Once we lost the 50-week moving average, that actually marked a change in direction for Bitcoin, and we actually moved in towards the bear market. But we didn't just melt down straight away. We actually had a retest first, then that's where we came down. So of course, one thing to note is the fact that we have Bitfinex whales actually going massively long, and previously every time we've seen this, we've seen bottoms on Bitcoin. So right now the longs are actually piling up and it's moving towards the upside, and this can be a sign that whales know that the open interest has been flushed and things are looking ready for Bitcoin to continue to move towards the upside. So it's likely that this has been the bottom, and we're going to see a relief rally before we continue towards the downside, if that's the case. Now, looking at the USDT dominance, you can see that we're trading within the range right now, and we have the stochastic RSI actually pointing at the tops. So every time that the stochastic RSI has been massively overbought, we actually have a move towards the downside. You can see this has happened every single time, and right now we're overbought and we've ticked towards the downside, and the EMA is actually angled down, indicating that the USDT dominance can see another move towards the downside, which will actually lead to the market recovering and moving towards the upside, since the dominance of USDT coming down means money may flow in towards Bitcoin and your altcoins. So of course, this is a good thing to be seeing if we're actually bullish. So of course, in the shorter time frames, I do think that that relief rally, since this is going to be coming down, is in play, and we're going to be seeing Bitcoin actually move towards the upside and then test that 50 weekly moving average resistance, which is of course at the 100k level too, which is a big psychological level. So that's one thing to be actually noting. The USDT dominance is actually showing us that right now we can actually see a small little bounce. Now looking at the longer time frames, we can see right now that the RSI is actually reaching really oversold levels. Historically, we've only hit this level about 3-4 times, and right now we're actually approaching that level. So of course, in the longer time frames, it is possible that once we get the relief rally and we have a big sell-off in towards the bear market, and we hit this one level on the RSI, it's going to be the area where we're going to be seeing a major low. So of course, in the shorter time frames, it looks like we can actually come up and test this 50 weekly moving average, and then we're going to be seeing a move towards the downside again. And once we actually have that move towards the downside and the RSI bottoms out properly, and we see, time spent below, that's going to be indicating, a major low in the market. And I'm going to be paying attention to this chart. And of course, in the higher time frames, I've covered this on the channel before, so you can see the timings from the orange dotted lines, which are the Bitcoin halvings, to the intervals of green, which are the weeks, after the halving, so about 500 days in advance. This actually times the Bitcoin tops perfectly. You can see the 3 previous times we actually entered this zone, we actually topped out, and right now we've actually exceeded the timing for the Bitcoin top, and we're actually moving towards the downside. So this is one reason why I do think that we're actually topped out, and it's likely we hit the 50 weekly moving average and we move towards the downside. So that's one thing to be bearing in mind. But of course, looking at the price action in general, you can see that we're actually testing a yearly open right now, and it is a weekend. So of course, volatility is going to be quite low and we can be consolidating. But of course, in the new week, if we see, the Coinbase premium continue to tick green and we continue to see liquidity pile up above us, it is likely we can grab that liquidity, test the 50 weekly moving average, and from there it's possible we can actually move towards the downside. So if you're enjoying the video and you want to be trading for yourself, make sure to click that first link down below for WEEX. WEEX is the cheapest exchange to be trading on. You can see you can get a 25% fee discount using my link down below, and a $300 as soon as you sign up. And of course, once you deposit funds onto the exchange, you can get a 20% deposit bonus. So make sure to be checking that out. You can see right here, if you deposit $2,000 and then you build up a trading volume to 200k, which is extremely easy, then of course you could be getting that $400 in a bonus right there, which is 20%. So that's actually looking quite good. And of course, you can get up to $30,000 in rewards in general. So you can see right here, you have a lot of tasks to be completing, and you could be getting up to 30,000 in rewards. So that's actually looking amazing right there. And that's WEEX, the first link down below, if you want to be claiming these rewards and you want to be getting an exchange that doesn't charge you high on fees. Especially if you're a trader that's liking to be getting in and out of positions a lot, you definitely want to be using an exchange that doesn't charge you a high amount of fees. So that's WEEX, that's the first link down below. So as for your altcoins right now, you can see that this chart right here is pointing towards the Federal Reserve total assets, and you can see Bitcoin dominance is plotted on there as well. And every time we have quantitative tightening actually ending, that's actually when you actually see Bitcoin dominance start to move towards the downside, and you're going to be seeing somewhat of an altcoin season. And every time QT actually starts, that's where Bitcoin dominance bottoms, and then it starts to move towards the upside, making the environment quite tough for altcoins. And that's exactly why altcoins haven't really performed this cycle as greatly. It was because we had quantitative tightening actually happening, and Bitcoin dominance has been climbing towards the upside quite a lot in general. But right now we are having the announcement. So 1st of December, which is on Monday, we're going to be having QT ending. And of course, we're going to be having Fed Chair Powell actually speaking the next day, so on Tuesday. And this is going to be, good news for the markets, which again can actually see Bitcoin have a nice bounce and altcoins have a good bounce into towards that 50 weekly moving average, just like we talked about. And of course, this speech is going to be Powell speaking and explaining everything that's happening in terms of quantitative tightening. And this is one thing to be actually marking out on your calendars, and I'm going to be covering it as well next week in terms of what's happened and what to expect. But of course, until Powell actually talks about quantitative easing, which might not be happening so quickly, then I think that altcoins are not going to be moving towards the upside so aggressively, especially if Bitcoin actually decides to go in towards a bear market after testing that 50-week moving average. I do think there's going to be a longer time frame thing that's going to be happening. But of course, anything can happen. It depends what Powell says. So we need to be, evaluating what he says in terms of quantitative easing and how quickly that's going to be happening. But of course, looking at the poly markets, you can see that Jerome Powell may not actually be the Fed chair for much longer. We're having a midterms coming up, and of course Trump is going to be appointing a new Fed chair very soon, and the most likely person is Kevin Hassett, who I think was on the Coinbase board, so he's pro crypto, and he's somebody that's likely going to be actually stimulating the economy by cutting rates a lot more, and of course implementing QE. So of course, this is one thing to be noting. You can see he's the most likely so far to be actually appointed as the new Fed. But in that shorter time frame, we have about 10 days till FOMC, and right now we have a 86.4% probability of a rate cut. So that's another thing to be watching out for in that Fed chair speech about FOMC. You know, any comments in terms of rate cuts and things, the probabilities are going to shift. So we're going to be watching this quite closely. But as of now, the probability is about 86.4% of a rate cut. So this is one thing to be watching for next week. Now, looking at the ETF inflows for Ethereum too, we can see that this week has been actually positive after a lot of weeks of negative inflows for the ETF for Ethereum. So right now, that's actually one sign that can be indicating that we can be bouncing. And of course, we have the majority of liquidity above us. So right now, Ethereum is quite oversold. We haven't quite had a sizable bounce yet. And you can see the RSI right now, so the stochastic RSI is massively oversold. And every time that we actually reach this region and we actually tick towards the upside, we had quite a considerable bounce. You can see previously here in 2023, we had a big bounce when the stochastic RSI was oversold. You can see in 2024, we had a good one as well. And earlier this year, we had a massive bounce after the stochastic RSI was this oversold. So right now, if it starts to tick towards the upside, it is likely we can actually have a bounce at least, you know, in towards the bull market support band, which is over here, and that's where we can potentially see a massive move towards the downside again. And maybe that's where ETH actually finds a bottom in towards the bear market lows, and then we can actually talk about, you know, the cycle resetting and things actually stabilizing and Ethereum continuing to move towards the upside again. So that'll be it for me. Make sure to be following me on X to be staying up to date with everything that I'm going to be posting, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a blessed rest of the day. Peace, guys. See ya. Bye bye.